Hi guys, and welcome to our first revision video on the Middle Ages. The Middle Ages generally is dated from 500 to 1500 CE, so that's about 1,000 years. And what we're looking at specifically today is the life of a knight. This will generally come up in section 4 of the ordinary level and higher level exam in the People in History question. What we're going to do today for handiness sake is we're going to divide the life of a knight into 3 sections. So the first thing we're going to look at is the education, or how he became a knight. The second thing we're going to look at is the weapons and armour used. And the last thing we're going to look at is what the life of a knight was like. If you guys can remember from first year, the Middle Ages would have been defined by this thing called the Feudal System. So the Feudal System was where the king was the person on top of the pyramid, as you can see there, and then the lords were beneath him, and he would give them title in return for money and fealty or loyalty. We'll be looking at that in our lords video later on. But as you can see, underneath the lords and the lesser lords is the knights, and these guys would have been recruited by the lords, who would have been their liege, as they were called, or their masters, and they would have had to fight for their king also. Our first section we're looking at is education. So we're looking at the key terms here are page, squire, knight, dubbing ceremony, a rise sir, and lord. A page was the first step to becoming a knight. If you wanted to become a knight, the first step you had to take was to become a page. Usually you would become a page at the age of 7. You had to be a boy of noble birth, so you could not become a knight if you were a peasant or a serf. At this age, they were usually taught chivalry, they were taught how to fence, they were taught archery, and they had to do a lot of chores and stuff like that. If you passed the stage of being a page, which took 7 years, you would then be promoted to the next level on the ladder up knighthood, which was a squire. So usually you'd start at the age of 14, and again, you would stay as a squire for 7 years. And you would be the knight's assistant, so you'd be helping him put on his armour, you'd take care of his horses. But also at this time, you're working with weapons like swords and lances, more dangerous weapons. And also, as a squire, you would follow your master, the knight you are an assistant to, into battle. So finally, after 7 years of being a page and 7 years of being a squire, then you become a knight. So at the age of 21, a squire can become a knight. To become a knight, they had this thing called the dubbing ceremony. So a ceremony would be held which made the squire become a knight. And he was tapped on both shoulders, and he was told to rise, sir. As you can see from this picture here, he'd be tapped on both shoulders with a sword, and they would say, "Arise, sir." Our next section we want to look at for our knights is their weapons and armour. So we've seen how they became a knight. Now, what weapons did they have? What armour did they use? So knights use 2 types of armour: chainmail armour and plate armour. This is a picture of someone in chainmail armour. As you can see, it is made of lots of metal rings kind of linked together to protect the knight. It was kind of lightweight, so it would be easier to move around. Unfortunately, weapons got stronger, so the armour wasn't able to protect the knight the way it had in the early Middle Ages. So as the Middle Ages progressed, weapons got stronger, and they had to devise this new form of armour called plate armour. As you can see there from the picture, it's something like you'd see in kind of a castle or something like that, that famous kind of type of armour. But the problem was it was much heavier, so the knights weren't as mobile. The weapons they used, so the knights were used to use weapons such as swords, crossbows, and maces. The mace is this ball with the spiky bits on it here, okay? And that could do some serious damage. Another weapon to use was a lance. You can see here, it's a long kind of pole that's used to, while on a horse, to kind of stab your opponent and knock them off their horse. Or if there's someone on the ground, it would do serious damage to them on the ground. Of course, no knight would be complete without his horse. As you can see, this is a horse with some attitude. the next thing that we're looking at, the last thing we're looking at in the armor and weapon section, is Quintain. So this was what the Squire used to train jousting on. Okay, so it was just something hanging, and they would have to try hit it with their lance. And our last section here is the life of a knight. The key words here are tournament or tourney, jousting, melee, siege, siege tower, catapult, trebuchet, and Code of Chivalry. There's three main aspects to the life of a knight. So you've got tournaments and tourneys, you've got a knight's participation in a siege, and you've got the Code of Chivalry. So what was a tournament or a tourney? So knights participated in these as a form of entertainment for their lords. The tournaments or tourneys were kind of mock battles that included competitions such as jousting. As you can see here, we talked about what a lance was. And they'd ride along, and you can see in that picture in the background there's a crowd looking on, and these two knights would clash into each other with the lance as a form of entertainment. Another game that would have, or competition that would have taken place at a tourney, is a melee fight. So they'd fight with blunted swords, and they'd have flags on the back of their armour, and you'd have to try capture the flag off the opposing knights. It wasn't all fun and games and fake fights for the knights. They also had to participate in a thing called sieges. So this would have been an attack on a castle. These things could get quite nasty. And when they were partaking in this siege, the knights would have to use some weapons, because running at a giant wall with a horse and a lance isn't really going to get you far. So one of the weapons they used was a siege tower. As you can see here, it's built up to the level of the top of the wall, and they push this in, and they have guys kind of climbing up through it. There'd be ladders and stairs inside it, and they'd get up and they'd be trying to get onto the curtain wall to attack the people inside the castle. Another famous thing they used was a catapult. So they used to fire stones, used to fire fireballs, and sometimes they'd even fire dead horses inside the castle walls to try spread disease around. Pretty nasty, and I'm sure the horse from the other side wouldn't be too happy about it. The catapult that was the most effective, and it was the most powerful type that was used in this time, was called a trebuchet. And this could fire something that weighed 90 kilos, so the size of a full-grown man, over 300 meters, the size of 3 football pitches, okay? So they could set it up far away, and then they could attack the castle from great distance. The last thing we're going to look at is the Code of Chivalry. So this was the code that knights had to live by. They took this oath that they would live by these rules. So the rules included respecting women, being courageous in battle. They weren't to lie or to cheat or to steal. They were never to back down from a challenge, and they were always to help the poor and defenceless. Some very noble sentiments there, I'm sure you'll agree. So there's a lot of work in that, a lot of keywords that we will be going over in class. So I look forward to working with you guys on this section of the Middle Ages.